Now, in case you missed it, the Prime Minister Christopher Luxon and French President Emmanuel Macron decided it would be an absolutely swell idea to create a new non-governmental organisation known as the Christchurch Call Foundation. Now, the Christchurch Call was originally formed in 2019, led by former Prime Minister Dame Jacinda Ardern in response to the mosque shootings on March 15th. Now, the initiative was intended on working to eliminate violent extremism and terrorist content online, but I think it's moved far beyond that. If you aren't in New Zealand, you may not appreciate just how despised the once idolised Jacinda Ardern is, and by many in this country. And she was clearly an orator who was capable of coercing so many people into going along with whatever it was that she and her government wanted to do. There are only so many lies one can tell before you just start to catch on and realise this is just not viable. This makes no sense. How can we sit here and listen to you? How can we sit here and take you seriously when, as far as I'm concerned, everything you are saying is lip service and your actions aren't following through? Of course, there is still a select few in New Zealand who hold Jacinda Ardern up as some deity, some goddess, somebody to aspire to, someone to inspire the generations. Though, of course, that is a view that one could argue is worthy of institutionalisation. So how does all of this relate to the Christchurch Call? Well, in short, Ardern didn't place New Zealand first when she was Prime Minister. Everything she does is seemingly aimed at advancing her own ideological position and shaping the world in that image. The issue with this is that she does so at the expense of New Zealanders, and at the expense of those who hold a different view, at the expense of free speech, and at the expense of democracy. Ardern was a young global leader alumni, and she spent the better part of 6 years as Prime Minister smiling for the camera whilst working against the national interest behind the scenes. For the most part, she got away with it. Firstly, because we have a heavily left-leaning fourth estate, who, like many people until recently, absolutely loved her. The public service was filled to the brim with like-minded ideologues, and they advanced Ardern's agenda in the shadows. I mean, we only need to look as far as Heipua to realise just how much the public service was willing to advance Jacinda Ardern and her last government's agenda whilst keeping the entire country in the dark, keeping Jacinda Ardern's own coalition partners in the dark back from 2017 to 2020. On top of all this, we come to what is arguably the most egregious betrayal of New Zealanders and our democracy in our history. Ardern's government paid the mainstream media through the Public Interest Journalism Fund, which was $55 million. And they did so to promote an ideological position which undermines our nation's democracy. It was an ideology which promoted the implementation of legislation which does indeed destroy our democracy. In this case, it was inherently related to co-governance and race-based policy. They said to the media, hey, look, media, you know how you're struggling. We're going to give you some money. Hope you're okay with that. We're going to give you some money. In return, not only can you not report on what we are saying fairly, not only can you not go out of your way to ensure that everything that we're saying as a government is accurate, but you actually have to promote co-governance. You have to promote the principles which we are using as the underpinning for our co-governance legislation, like Three Waters, for example. You're not allowed to write something that is anti-Three Waters or, based on going against promoting the principles which we decide are going to be doctrine. You see, we look at things like the Te Tiriti o Waitangi principles, and, well, yes, unless the media abides by those principles which, by the way, are fluid, they are malleable if the Waitangi Tribunal has anything to say about it. If the media does not go in alignment with those, they do not go in alignment with a ideologically implemented set of beliefs, well, then you're going to be in trouble. So, you've got a couple options. You can say no, we won't give you money, and you'll just, you go into bankruptcy faster. Or you can behave yourself. You can accept this money, and you can promote what we want you to. And so, of course, the majority of the media, they said, yeah, sure. And for the following few years, not only did everything the media do promote ideology, it rejected facts. It says, oh yes, we understand that this is a race-based policy which is inherently racist, But we're not going to report it as such. So we're going to report that the opposition to racist policy is indeed the racism. That's what the media did. And this is just the tip of the iceberg type stuff. Our media was dependent on Ardern's government to stay alive. And we can see that more than ever right now as those very media organisations which relied on Jacinda Ardern, relied on the Labor government to bail them out, are now going under. When we look at News Hub, they're gone, burger. Look at One News. They haven't cut staff. Bye-bye Sunday, bye-bye Fair Go. Ardern had the fourth estate in the palm of her hand and maintained control over the narrative for years. To this day, some people call her the greatest Prime Minister we've ever had. But if we actually compare her tenure to that of other Prime Ministers, especially in recent history, she's well near the bottom. And for me personally, I take treason rather seriously. And so, in my book, she's dead last. But of course, it gets worse. Ardern opted to hire a group of far-left radicals known as the Disinformation Project. They're a research group who has famously claimed that white women who braid their daughters' hair, do a bit of knitting, are white supremacists, or at least potentially white supremacists. I know. And according to the Daily Examiner, the Disinformation Project, the director of the Disinformation Project has stated the following: Marxism, feminism, post-colonial theory, these are the tools I use every day in my work and in the construction of my identity. Ironically, despite this being inherently radical in nature, she and the Disinformation Project were tasked with assessing what was and was not online disinformation and what was and was not radical or extremist in nature. The group also contributed in the creation of a propaganda film, made by Stuff Circuit, and also part of the Public Interest Journalism Fund. And it was a true display of how Ardern utilised what was available to her to control the narrative, hide her failures, and demonise those who stood in the way of her achieving her ideological goals. Furthermore, the Disinformation Project has been utilised as a tool to justify initiatives like the Christchurch Call, justify hate speech legislation, which the last Labor government wanted to implement. And it would have severely impacted the freedom of speech rights of New Zealanders. I would very likely not be allowed to make the video I'm currently making. And that's the severity we're talking about here. We're using a bunch of Marxist radicals to determine what is and is not okay. Anything that's remotely right of their far-left extremist ideology is viewed as far-right extremist ideology. Myself, I can sit in the centre all I like. That's not going to stop them. That is not going to stop them from saying, that is hate speech, you should be locked up for it. You should at the very least have anything associated with this video removed from the internet forever. Additionally, the Disinformation Project was key in shutting down certain narratives around the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. You see, if you actually follow the COVID-19 pandemic in as neutral a way as you possibly could, or, I don't know, just as someone with eyes or something, you may have realised that despite all the talk, despite all the so-called admiration from around the world, we did an abysmal job. It's all well and good preventing us from dying in 2020 and 2021, but on a per capita basis, we're middle of the pack. Last I looked, New Zealand's deaths per million were like 100 and something in the world. I think it was like 115th or something like that. It's not very good. There are so many more countries that have done better in that respect. Now, we consider and call it, we don't report as well. Or we do report better than others, and as such, our deaths look worse. Sure. But that's not even factoring in the actual harm we did to our nation, be it the economic harm, be it the health harm, because people had really important surgeries delayed forever. They were unable to get the healthcare support they needed when they needed it. There was an extreme amount of backlogs in pretty much every area of the health system you can think of. I myself, I'm waiting on a list for a pain clinic. Now, pain clinics are a little bit more niche than your average bit of healthcare, but, I have to wait 9 months for that. I waited around about 9 months just to see a cardiologist. Now, and I'm sure you can understand what I'm alluding to when I need a cardiologist at my age. There is so much that the last Labor government has to answer for, but Ardern expertly used the media to prevent that discussion really taking place. It was a matter of, if you oppose what the government did, because the narrative is that we are the best government in the world when it comes to handling COVID, well, then you're a conspiracy theorist, you're an extremist, you need to be shut down. Anything you say is not acceptable. At the end of the day, without a few radical Marxists like the Disinformation Project, Jacinda Ardern would not have been so successful in conning millions of people for years. And we're not just talking about millions of people in New Zealand. No, she conned millions of people around the world. Ardern's track record is one of deceit. She is hidden from accountability and positioned herself as the face of online censorship on a global level. This is the woman who controlled the better part of 5 million people, and the woman who lied to those very same people for many, many years. The woman who worked against the best interests of those people. And she is going to be the face of online censorship for pretty much the entire world that wants to involve themselves with the Christchurch Call. Don't be mistaken. This isn't just about the likes of Brenton Tarrant and ISIS with their propaganda beheading videos. This isn't just about the very real threats to governments and public safety. No, this is a stepping stone towards a world where global leaders devolve powers, or at least devolve the decision-making right to unelected globalists sitting around a table, taking the views of radical Marxists as gospel, and then formulating policy that the rest of the world should adopt. Formulating policy that the likes of Meta should adopt, the likes of X should adopt. That's where this goes. It's saying, hey, look, you guys, you should come here. You should participate in the Christchurch Call Foundation. You should invest in the Christchurch Call Foundation. You should have a look at us, see what we recommend, and do absolutely everything we say because we're moral. We're the future. And to be fair, if the globalist agenda is anything to go by, if you subscribe to that, well, then this is far more of a threat than you actually realize. Because if, as Klaus Schwab very concisely put, he's penetrated the cabinets, and if he has indeed penetrated the cabinets as he has said, well, it's not going to be very hard for one of his young global leader alumni to attract those who are penetrated into the cabinets of global governments and get them to participate in whatever the Christchurch Call Foundation recommends. But it is for these very reasons that our Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, has made a very serious error. He's taken the Christchurch Call further and he's legitimised it. What he should have done was just remove Ardern as New Zealand's special envoy and defunded it. Not very difficult. Instead, he's turned it into a foundation with Jacinda Ardern as its patron. But here's what really gets under my skin, and it really should get under yours too. When speaking to Chris Lynch of, Christchurch's newsroom, Prime Minister Christopher Luxon outlined that the evolution into a foundation was Jacinda Ardern's idea. The Prime Minister who we elected to right the wrongs of Jacinda Ardern's government, to right the wrongs of her complete failure of her government, has turned around and given her exactly what she wants. Another opportunity to control the masses through manipulation of the media.